first?
No, usually I stream first and then record. So it's good here.
Okay. Yeah. مش عارف مش هنرد على ناصر اللي حكى معانا شو اسمه هلا انا بدي اياه هلا انا رجعت اول ودهم مسدد ساعه عاد كل فلسطين عندهم مركز مثلا سنتر في نفس الوقت هم يعملوا واحد بيرجع اسرائيل ولا عم تعطينا هذا التفصيل أنا مش بس ربع ساعة نفس الوقت عم الإنسان رئيسي بدي فيه نعمل شيء هون هون يعطوني شيء ثاني
Well, no, just because I wanted to see the, like, is this going to be in the background?
I mean, it'll only show up now, but when you have the Skype on and the PowerPoint, it won't show up.
What's going to show up? Their presentation?
Yeah, so.
Okay.
We can put your background there instead of
so that when you have the screen, we can make sure that the screen is looking at the positioning of the speaker.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, that's perfect. This one, yeah. So that you so come here.
I think he's coming, yes, he is coming. You know who?
Comes to our conference.
Good, I know he comes from the
Yeah, he's a lawyer to
How long have you been doing the conference here?
This is the first time.
First time, yes.
Always we do it in the hotel. We saw that Symposium small one was next year is our 20th anniversary.
Okay.
Yes. But we'll put you on our email list and you have it all over the
Good. No, be glad to. Be glad to see if we can join it. It'll be the 20th of here in Washington.
always in Washington. We have a lot of activities around. Just time.
Good. No, I kept you a regular.
Oh, okay, then I want to go
Everything is fine, yes.
Okay, you've never been in our events anymore.
Yes, I have. No, I have my passports. Yeah, no, I have. We've had them up in on Nebraska Avenue as well. You used to.
Right, yes, yeah.
But no, I've been to several of them.
Okay.
What's the reason for the change in
Just this is not a conference. We do the banquet and conference next day. Now this is more one to gear up for next year. And this is focusing on Jerusalem. It's going to be a good venue for Jerusalem. Just like always to wrap things together with other organizations to show that that's good. What do you call it? Empower God the subject. Yes.
Okay, good.
All right, let's see.
Very nice to meet you.
All together. I'm gonna write them on.
I live in 6 or 8 2 minutes. Very few people do It takes a little, in my experience, it takes a little. check on
Yeah.
it's a terrible way to do banking. What's the
You would expect within a couple of days.
I wake up every morning and all my accounts I have.
How did you get in without checking you? I just wanted you to know that I got him.
Testing. Sounds good? It's good?
Give him a star or
We were meeting at 8:30 and then it was 8:45. He was early, all right.
You still have to go back to me.
You don't take a picture of it. So that I can do it. There's two people.
Doing the work.
See, when you're amazed, I mean, they, all these the stuff I want to see is not see the issue. There's always like security. By releasing the file, people like me who records, what you see is in the day that the paper it's very difficult for the cover up. So what you saw was leading up to it's a massive movement. So that means somebody was huge department of office. So much before. So that looks, it starts to look like big. I mean, there's no reason that if you're nobody gives a damn who you are a month before you shoot.
Ratib, we ask the people to come in so we can start. Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the HCEF International Symposium, Jerusalem, the City of Peace for All. We are delighted that you are able to join us this morning at the Jerusalem Fund for Education and Community Development. And we are also emitting digitally, so we are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. And to start this morning, I welcome Father Jim Gardner from the Franciscan Monastery in Washington, D.C. for the opening prayer.
So let us pray. God, we praise you for your mighty deeds throughout all of history. And we give you thanks and praise for the holy city of Jerusalem, which is the focus of our attention this morning. A city of peace, a city from which we should be able to learn how to live together better, in peace, in harmony, with goodwill, that we might learn to love and forgive one another, that we might advance your purposes in the world. We ask a blessing. We may call you by different names, but I think we have the same devotion to you. That's why we ask a blessing on everything that we say and do today, especially on your holy city. Amen.
Thank you, Father. Now I would like just to extend my heartfelt thanks to a lot of people who have helped with making this conference and symposium possible. I would like to start by thanking the Jerusalem Fund for Education and Community Development, and specifically Mr. Muhammad, the Executive Director, for his generosity and for all the digital and logistical support he has provided to us. Seema Dajani, also of the Jerusalem Fund. To the Board of Directors of the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation, to the President and CEO of HCEF, Ratib Rabia, Rosillo Rabia, Carol Monica Burnett, Frank Carroll, May Nazar Kafati, Sally King, Rima Kawas, and to all of the moderators and speakers who will be introduced in due time. Now I invite Sir Ratib Rabia to come forward and bring warm greetings from the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. It looks like, it is Saturday for people didn't show up. They just register and they think, they are coming later when we get to the political part of it. At the end of the day, that's the interest of it for Jerusalem. They forget about the faith. The morning is not that good enough for them. Anyway, but that's good. They are here at least, and that's we are going to start our program. And I want to thank Jerusalem Fund again, because the topic of Jerusalem, it's important to all of us, to all the three monastic faith. And Muhammad, thank you for all what you have done. And Muhammad, even he's excited about that topic because this is Jerusalem Fund. He has his son, 7 months old. He's attending the first conference, in about Palestine. He start with him early. Thank you all, and this is the idea of it, to have this small symposium focused on Jerusalem. Actually, we have every year full conference with gala and 2-3 days, but this year we have low profile and focus on Jerusalem because next year is our 20th anniversary. And this is where we need to build one big one, and we thought we make it down, then we go up, big one for next year, and hopefully we'll see you all again and involved in that. This is something, about Jerusalem. Everybody's talking about Jerusalem. Everybody talking about, what's going to happen with that. And we want to focus on East Jerusalem a little bit because a lot of people there, they are living in East Jerusalem. They are suffering really because they are not supported and they are not living their lives as it should be. And I will touch on that later on when I talk about the tourism toward Jerusalem, and say we'll talk about some of the problems Jerusalem is facing. But anyway, the next panel too, that will be something about to learn a lot about Jerusalem. I just want to welcome you again, and hopefully we'll have a good, productive day where we all have to involve in the discussion. That's why we call it symposium. We are not lecturing you. We need your input, and we need you to involve with us and see where we can go from here. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Ratib, very much. Let me introduce myself by simply saying I'm Saliba Sarsar, a professor of political science at Monmouth University in New Jersey, and chair of the HCEF Research and Publication Committee. And I would like just to make a few remarks to introduce today's symposium by asking questions such as, are you from Jerusalem? Have you visited Jerusalem? Have you had a chance to connect with the living stones? Have you prayed for Jerusalem, the city of peace for all? The city was founded around 3000 BC, but unfortunately was attacked 52 times, captured and recaptured 44 times, besieged 23 times, and destroyed 2 times. However, over the centuries, large segments of humanity have turned to her, including the followers of the 3 monotheistic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In addition to the historical and religious transformation that the city has witnessed, the city is steeped in competing narratives and realities. This symposium highlights Jerusalem as the city of peace for all, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, Israelis and Palestinians, and others. While there will be the sharing of information, perspectives, and reflections on Jerusalem, there will also be an important presentation on new strategies to assist East Jerusalem, as well as serious analyses of Israel-Palestine, Jerusalem, and the prospects of peace, given current regional and international conditions. In between the morning and afternoon sessions, we will hear a message from the Catholic Archdiocese of Washington and see the short documentary film Juduri, which means My Roots, by Lubna Turjman. Let's open our hearts and minds. Let's engage in deep listening and critical thinking so as to understand the meaning and significance of Jerusalem to our identity, to our lives, and to our future. We encourage you to ask questions or make small comments as we proceed with the program. And the first session this morning is titled Jerusalem, a Status Report, and is moderated by Sir Ratib Rabia.
Good morning again. I guess this is very important that we start our day with 2 experts on Jerusalem who are living in Jerusalem, and how we can hear the status of Jerusalem from all aspects. And we have 2 speakers, Dr. Bernard Sabella, and then Father, who is with his executive secretary of the Department of Service to Palestinian Refugees of the Middle East Council of Churches, which he's going to speak to us. He's from Jerusalem, lives in Jerusalem, but he was on vacation in Greece, and we didn't leave him alone. and we are going to get him on Skype, and he will talk to us about this because he is walking encyclopedia about Jerusalem. You know what I mean? You know, I cannot find somebody who knows about Jerusalem more than him. And he's writing a book, you know, about his memoir, and, you know, his editor is here. You know, if he doesn't answer the questions right, you can go to Monica, and she's the one, she knows everything about him. And the other one is Father McDonough. He's the senior advisor to the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem, and he lives in Jerusalem, you know, and he has a Palestinian accent, no, the Irish accent, but, you know, that's, you know, you just, sometimes we get confused between these two accents because we have the same problem for a long time, you know, as Irish and Palestinians. But anyway, their bios are in the speaker bios. You can look at it, and I don't want to read it and waste time on that, but, you know, you should read and know who are these two people. I guess we are going to start with Dr. Bernard from Athens, and hopefully he is not in his shorts and, you know, vacationing there. And let's see what his, here's Dr. Sabella, and let's hear him, you know, and then Father McDonough will take over after that.
Hello.
Dr. Sabella, can you hear us?
Yes, I can see you and hear you.
Wonderful. So the audience is all yours. Let me pull out your presentation as well. Do you have video ability in your computer?
Hello.
Yes. Can you turn on the video from your computer so we can see you as well?
Video, wait. Yeah, I'm trying. You see me now?
Wonderful.
Okay. So let me know when to start.
Yes, you can start.
Okay, so first of all, thank you. It's really a privilege to be part of this important symposium. And thank you, HCEF, for organizing it, and the Palestine Center, or the Jerusalem Center. Basically, I know that I have 15 minutes, so I'm going to use the 15 minutes. When we talk about Jerusalem today, we cannot talk really of one city. We are talking about two cities with disparities, inequalities, and with all kinds of problems that need solutions. And I'm not basing my position on talking about disparities on simply Palestinian position, but I'm basing it really on two Israeli organizations. One is the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, which with the acronym ACRI, and the other is B'Tselem, which is a human rights organization. And even though both are criticized or are not very warmly received by the Israeli government, yet the reality is that they are saying that the 36 or 37% of Palestinians living in Jerusalem are suffering way up in terms of poverty, level of poverty. So they refer to 76% of the Jerusalem Arab population living in poverty, under poverty line, and almost 84% of children, Palestinian children in East Jerusalem living under the poverty line. If you compare that with 22% for the families in Israel and 30% for Israeli children in Israel itself, then you are seeing that there is a huge disparity between the two populations. And I'm not going to go on to talk about these disparities because you can see them. Now, one of the problems, one of the problems you can notice in Jerusalem is that, first of all, you have it's not a problem that you have the three religious and the two national groups. I mean, this is Jerusalem. But where the problem is the attempt by some among religious Jews, extremist religious Jews, to change the status quo on Al-Haram al-Sharif. And that, or the Mosque of Jerusalem, the Grand Mosque of Jerusalem. And that has been a place of friction, a place of contestation, and it has not really worked for the benefit of harmony and coexistence in the Holy City. In July, there was 2 Arab Israelis killed 3 Israeli soldiers on the Aqsa Mosque, on the Al-Haram al-Sharif compound, and as a result, the Israelis wanted to introduce all kinds of electronic control mechanism like gates, like cameras, and so on. But there was an absolutely beautiful non-violent protest by Palestinians, Muslims basically, but also with Christians. And eventually the Israeli government stopped that and decided to go back to the status quo. Certainly King of Jordan, King Abdullah, played a very, very important role in that, as well as Mr. Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority. Now, one other thing I like to remind you, even though the Christians in Jerusalem are only 1.4%, yet I am still impressed by a beautiful memorandum that the heads of churches in Jerusalem came up with in November 1994. And in fact, this memorandum can be used, in my opinion, maybe I am biased, but it can be used as a basis for bringing peace to Jerusalem. Because the memorandum in the end said that if we do not come to a Jerusalem that is all-inclusive, then we cannot have peace in the Holy Land. And I fully agree with that, because we want to have Jerusalem as an all-inclusive city, where not only the presence of a Christian community that goes back 2,000 years, but also the presence of both Muslims and Jews in the city should contribute to a formula where all of us can learn and can live respecting one another and understanding and appreciating our religious, ethnic differences, as well as the common traits that unite us as all children of God. Now, I know I'm not a theologian, but let me very quickly go to the different positions of the different parties, because I have only about 5-6 minutes. Now, if we look at the Israeli position is very clear. Jerusalem, both East and West Jerusalem, are together the eternal capital of the state of Israel. Meaning that there is no way we can share the city with the Palestinians. And the Palestinians who live in the city as permanent residents, even though they were born there, but they are permanent residents, similarly to the green card in the US, cannot really say that they have all full rights. And Acre and Bethlehem, as I referred to, clearly point out to the disparities, inequalities that exist between Palestinians and Israelis, or between Israelis and Palestinians. So the basic law of 1980, passed by the Knesset, Israel's parliament, says Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Now, the Palestinian position, in contrast, says East Jerusalem is occupied territory, and according to UN Security Council Resolution 242, and according to previously signed agreements with the State of Israel, the status of Jerusalem is subject to permanent status negotiations. And this has not happened. Now, what is interesting in the Palestinian position is that it insists that Jerusalem would not be divided again. Palestinians do not accept to divide Jerusalem once again. Jerusalem should remain one city in which the two national groups and the three religious groups can run elbow with each other, and for which arrangements should be made in order to allow for the one undivided city of Jerusalem to prosper and to celebrate its being really the capital of all and not the capital of one side to the exclusion of other sides. And the Palestinians also say that we believe in an open city, accessible, and we also believe in freedom of religion and worship, especially freedom of worship. Now, the UN clearly, in its total of 6 UN Security Council resolutions, it clearly says that Jerusalem cannot be simply the capital of the State of Israel, and therefore there must be negotiations over this point. And Jerusalem should be discussed between the two parties. And the European Union position is similar to that of the UN. And of interest in the European Union position is that it calls to reopen Palestinian institutions in East Jerusalem that were closed by the Israeli government. And there we have a problem, because in 1993, the late Shimon Peres, who occupied the presidency of the State of Israel, he was then the foreign minister of Israel, wrote a letter to the Norwegian foreign secretary telling him that Israel will do everything possible to allow East Jerusalem institutions to continue and to serve the interests of the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Now, this has not happened. On the contrary, more than 20 or so organizations in East Jerusalem that are municipal, welfare, research, information organizations, even Chamber of Commerce, have been closed by Israel. Now, the UK, which is an important country, is arguing that we should respect what the two parties decide. In other words, the two parties need to agree on the status of Jerusalem. Whether this will happen or not, I cannot tell. And the position of the United States, particularly Congress, is that Jerusalem is the capital of the State of Israel, and the United States Embassy should be in Israel should be established in Jerusalem. But ever since then, and even with the latest electioneering promise of President Trump, the move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem has not been affected due to the fact that the US president does not want, different administrations do not want to prejudge the final issue negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. And there are so many factors that come in to make moving the embassy a problematic exercise. Finally, my question is that can there be peace without the peace of Jerusalem? Nowadays, Palestinians and especially Christians are concerned about the takeover by Teret Kohanim of the Jaffa Gate properties of the Greek Orthodox Church, which an Israeli court has judged to be a correct deal. And what the Palestinians and the Christians in Jerusalem are arguing is that if you take away these properties and give them for 99 years to the Jewish organization, so they become alienated from the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate and from the church, then this is going to be a kind of a letdown to the sustainability of the Christian community in Jerusalem. Some Israelis do not see it that way. Some Israelis see it as a legal battle. But for us in Jerusalem, we are also sensitive that it's not as simple as a legal battle, that there is a political element there that is telling us in Jerusalem, as Palestinians, as residents, as citizens of the city of Jerusalem, that you are not that welcome, and that if we can take your property, and eventually if we can tell you to move, and you move, that would be better for the kind of Jerusalem that some Israelis want to see, which is an exclusive and unaccepting of the other Jerusalem. And this is very painful, because what we want really is we do want the peace of Jerusalem. And I can assure you that not only Palestinian Christians want the peace of Jerusalem, but the overwhelming majority of Palestinians and some key people across the globe and some in Israel would want to come to a position to see Jerusalem not simply as the capital of Israel, but as the capital of the two peoples, where the three religious communities can live side by side in harmony, and where having peace in Jerusalem could really signal having peace between Israelis and Palestinians. I hope that this will happen one of these days, and I wish your symposium, Sir Ratib Rabia, and your good self, Maya, all the best in this symposium.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very
Yes,
much,
I will stay on.
Bernard.
I will stay on. Yeah.
Can you stay on, in order to have Father McDonough, then we'll have some, to entertain some questions. Could you stick around for a little bit? Okay, thank you. Father McDonough.
Having heard Dr. Sabella give the status report, there's no point in me repeating a status report. So having had a chance to glimpse his text beforehand, I shifted gears and went in a different direction. Rather than look at what is, I would like to take an approach of what is not and what can be brought, particularly by the church, to the table in this discussion. Go back to the book of Proverbs. If my people perish for lack of vision. This is what I see happening in some way. It's not the whole story, but it's not being included in it. The vision for Jerusalem is lost in a secular tension. Now, I'm not advocating necessarily religious, because that can be, religion can go very, very wrong when it goes wrong. So I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket, but I do believe a vision that must speak to hearts and bring change of this, because words, eloquent and otherwise, have been brought to intellects and they're not effective. And we can endlessly go on year after year on the debate. The church needs to understand this. Israel has every right to criticize the Christian world for what has happened in the past. But sadly, the church has lost its nerve to speak prophetically to Israel regarding why Israel was chosen in the first place. And why was Jerusalem chosen by God to be a holy city, God's throne and his footstool? If we don't get back to speaking to this land that delights in using biblical definitions to define itself, we must employ biblical words to bring a certain vision back to those who deem themselves the chosen. Chosen for what is the issue? Sadly, one can take delight in being chosen, but that's superficial and that dies very quickly and alienates a lot of people. What were you chosen for? You were chosen to be a paradigm to the nations of God. If you wanted to see how the community of God works, look to this land that was called to be the Israel of God. A nation of integrity, God's integrity, justice, holiness, truth, and peace. That is your divine vocation. How are you responding to it? Your boast is not in secularism, in medical advancements, technology, in a Dead Sea products, whatever you might come up with, or fruit, or dates, or whatever. That is wonderful, and blessed be God for those gifts. But that's not the divine vocation, and that's where I believe Israel will fall unless it comes back to why it was chosen, to be a humble people. Go back to 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, turn from their wicked ways, and repent, I will hear their cry from heaven, and I will heal their land. Now that's the God of Israel speaking to Israel. Is there anyone listening? Is the church even, have we lost our backbone, our nerve, to speak to Israel and said, yes, you speak to us about what we did historically that was wrong, and you have every right and responsibility to do that. But church, you have every right and responsibility to speak to the call that Israel was given and challenge Israel. Live up to the word that your ancestors boasted about. Don't just gloat over where the chosen. And as Golda Meir reportedly said, because of the Holocaust, Israel can do whatever it likes. That is totally unacceptable. I've heard people say that, oh, but don't the Muslims say, get rid of Israel off the map? I said, but you know who said this first? Get rid of all Arabs into the sea. You don't hear that one broadcast. So I'm not taking sides, but neither side is faultless, and neither side is pure. But the word of God is pure. And that's the only thing that I can see in individual lives and collective life will bring such a conviction of the heart to say, we must humble ourselves and live under God. If we divorce God from the question, we've lost it. We will spend endless years and decades and centuries looking for the solution. Why? Because both sides have proved they're very willing to fight, to kill, to get a piece of land to support their identity. This is not going away anyplace. No one side telling the other, this is our land. One rabbi said, I have no objection to a Palestinian state. I have no objection to a two-state solution. He just said, as long as it's not on Israel's land. And of course, we know what that means. That's nothing to do with the 1967 lines, etc. It all belongs to us. So dream on, Palestinians. Talk all you like. Bring in the United States for shuttle diplomacy and Europe on occasion. It's all a dream. It's a fantasy. It's not working out until, I believe, the representative, the church, needs to rise up and not just try to be diplomatic and taking sides, this and that. And then, of course, the church needs to clean up its act as well. Let's face it, the properties that were just mentioned by Dr. Sabella in Jaffa Square that were sold off or leased off for 99 years, which nobody in their right mind would make a lease for such a length of time today, the church needs to examine itself and say, what have we done wrong? Years ago, I heard a Southern Baptist preacher, Bob Mumford, say this: God fixes a fix to fix you. If you unfix the fix before you're fixed, he'll fix another fix to fix you. Right? Now, that's the reality. Life is a big fix with many fixes in between. We're broken. And God is saying, you're broken. I have to repair you. My people, you are a broken people. Israel, Palestine, Ireland, England, the whole world is broken. And we're sadly looking to mere mortals to rescue us. And God said, put not your trust in princes, in mortal men in whom there is no salvation, in whom there is no help. Why have we relegated God to his armchair in heaven? He's like a grandfather for most people. You can poke him in the stomach and you say, oh, Grandpa, how are you? And Grandpa has all his grandchildren. And you notice grandparents love to have the grandchildren visit because they're going home very soon. And they undo what Mom and Dad did. It took them a week to do. They go to Grandma's for the weekend, and Mom and Dad have to spend the next week repairing the damage that was done. A bit cynical there, isn't it? But you get the flavor of what I see going on in the Middle East. It's an endless circle, and it's quite vicious. So go back to the name Jerusalem. Yeru, which some will say means either a city or a foundation, or if you're in Aramaic, you'll conclude that it means to shoot, not in the violent sense, but in the sense of water or raining, the city of Shalom. And of course, Shalom and Salam are on the lips of everybody over there, and nobody finds Shalom or Salam. You know, and it doesn't just mean peace, as we have the English word. Shalom means completeness, wholeness, unbrokenness. So Israel, are you striving for completeness, unbrokenness, wholeness? If you're not, you're failing miserably in your response to the thing you delight in, being chosen. You were never meant to be another secular nation. You were meant to be a humble people. The humility of God. It's a bit like looking to a married couple. They're meant to be the practical demonstration of Trinitarian love. If you want to see what Trinity looks like, look to a family, husband, wife, and children. But can we rely on that sign today? If a priest is meant, and a consecrated person is meant to be a sign of the final state of affairs, what happens after you die? Jesus said in heaven there's no marriage, there's no giving in marriage, so what is it? The priest should be able to stand head and shoulders in society as a living sign that says, this is the final state of affairs. Our relationship with God is absolutely astonishing, wonderful, totally fulfilling. But what do you hear? Oh, we should be married. As though marriage was a remedy for concupiscence. I assure you, too many people have proven it's not. In fact, it can provoke more of it than if you were living an abstinent life. So these signs are all breaking down around the world, but you see it in our own clergy, you see it in marriages, you're seeing it in nations, and in a very microscopic way, or a microcosmic way, you're seeing it with the land of Israel. totally divorced from its vocation. Until we bring that back, then all the eloquent things that Dr. Sabella shared, I don't think they're going to get it, because there's an endless fight. It's us against them. Now, what has happened in some practical ways in Israel? A dehumanization of the opposite has happened. So you're looked upon as you're not wanted in this land. We tolerate you. Well, we're the only democracy in the Middle East. Lord have mercy. Do we buy into lies or what? That's not true. When I first went to Jerusalem, I wanted to rent a house there, and I saw an advertisement, and I called up the number, and the guy says, yeah, we'd love to have you. You sound like you're an American with an Irish accent. I said, you're right. But he said, are you Jewish? I said, no, I'm Christian. I'm Catholic. He said, sorry, we don't rent to you. Try that here. Doesn't work. That's not democracy. It's another one of those deceptive titles that have been designed to deflect us from what the real issues are. The land belongs to God. The book of Leviticus even tells you that. It's rented out, as it were, or it's leased to a tenant. And we know their history when God says, look, you haven't fulfilled my purpose. We're going to send you on an exodus. Off to Babylon. We'll deport you. Could you imagine a prophet in our time saying what the prophet Habakkuk said? He looked around and he said, God, all I see is terror and violence. What are you doing about it? God, in essence, says back to him, you won't believe it even if I tell you. What do you mean? Tell me. I am bringing my servant Nebuchadnezzar against my people. Now get the flavor. For those of you who know the history of Nebuchadnezzar, this man was making lampshades out of human skin long before Adolf Schicklgruber. God saying, my servant Nebuchadnezzar? Can we tolerate that line? Who would put those words on the mouth of God? And he's used the Babylonian Lord, and he said his right proceeds from his might. His chariots are swifter than leopards. You see, that's the fix that God is using to fix. Now I'm going to quit on this because what I had prepared isn't quite what you needed to hear at this moment. But this is the problem that I see over there. There's a tremendous lack of humility all around. Christians, Muslims, Jews, all into it. We have terminology in private that we'll speak about other people but never own up to it in public. That has to be repented of. We cannot dehumanize another person just because they're different in many different ways. We must speak truth, though. Truth is what sets you free. But as one of my brother priests said to me, he said, it will tick you off long before it sets you free. So that's we need courageous prophets who are willing to die non-violently for the sake of speaking truth. And the church is called to be a prophetic voice in the world, because the world doesn't belong to the Lord in the sense of he's not leading it and guiding it. He doesn't get a chance to lead and guide it. Why? We're busy with parliaments and congresses and Knessets and all the rest of it. We're running it. And God says, yeah, you're running it into the ground. That's the problem. Now, either come through the school of grace or the school of hard knocks. And all of us know that individually. We've gone sometimes through the school of hard knocks. And the colors of the school of hard knocks, black, blue, yellow, bruises. You see them on people who are into football. That's the school of hard knocks. Enough said. I see Ratib has risen. Not from the dead, but...
Let's stay here, Father.
You know,
let's take some question and answers.
Henry VIII said to his second wife, darling, I won't keep you long. So I'm not going to keep you long.
Thank you. Okay, do you have anybody has any question for Father McDonough, which is...
Or
really,
Dr. Sabella,
Dr. Sabella, of course, you know, I have two options. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabia, for Ratib, for organizing this event and for giving me the chance to meet Dr. Sabella, who taught me sociology at Bethlehem University. And
Yes.
he is younger than me, by the way. Dr. Sabella, you had a very wonderful presentation about the reality in Jerusalem, and the figures that you mentioned are meaningful and should be studied by not only researchers but should be considered by politicians and decision makers. And this confirms the reality that Jerusalem has never been divided as it is these days, despite the Israeli claim that it is a unified city. No, it's not. And several years ago, actually in 1999, there was a very interesting research by Jerome Segal and Nader Said on Jerusalem that could be one of the academic way outs, actually, when the two researchers surveyed the Israeli and Palestinian populations with very simple questions. They asked the Israelis, do you mind giving Jerusalem back to the Palestinians? And the answer was big no. 80% or more said no. But when they asked, are you willing to give Wadi al-Joz, they received 60 or 70% yes, Jabal Mukabbir yes, and other neighborhoods yes. So you think this could be one of the solutions that people could resort to? And Father McDonough, I thank you again for bringing the book of Proverbs, but I want also to reference a different quotation from the book of Proverbs. He who loves his child should care to discipline him. Mm-hmm. And this is also required from the international community. It is not enough just to be a friend of Israel by providing blind support to Israel. If you care about Israel, you should do something else than just blind support. Thank you so much.
Dr. Sabella, would you start?
Basically, I agree with Dr. Saliba, and I thank him, by the way, for taking my presentation and making it into a PowerPoint presentation. The question in Jerusalem really is, we go back to the question of trust. Now, for an overwhelming majority of Israelis, and let's be very, very factual about it, they would not want to divide Jerusalem again. Now, where we have the lack or the absence is in letting the Israelis know that we Palestinians also do not want to divide Jerusalem again. And when the Israelis say we don't want to divide Jerusalem, it's as if we Palestinians want to divide Jerusalem, you see. So how do we arrive at this, I would say, middle common ground on Jerusalem? And yes, you are correct that the overwhelming majority of Israelis would not want to see the Palestinian Authority in East Jerusalem. But they do not know about the position of the Palestinian Authority, which is an open city, undivided city, a shared city, a city where all can live side by side without interference with each other. Certainly, in order to get to that point, we need to have a kind of a vision, not simply a vision, but also the logistical part of how do we get Palestinians and Israelis to live side by side in the city and to make arrangements, municipal, judicial, legal, cultural, educational, economic, that would bring the two communities together. In other words, today Palestinians are saying very clearly, we want one city, but we don't want that city to be all over an Israeli city. We want it to be a universal city where you could have Christians, Muslims, and Jews rubbing elbow with each other in the city without really accepting each other, and at the same time working together for a better and different future for the city. Now, this vision, unfortunately, is not passed on to the Israeli side. Actually, it's not passed on to European and American sides. And the idea is that if the Palestinians want to get Jerusalem back, it's just to redivide it. And this is not correct. Today in Jerusalem, you have a reality that Meron Benvenisti, who was the ex vice mayor for Jerusalem when Mayor Tedok Kolek was in office, was saying there is a symbiotic relationship in the city that you cannot undo. Yes, it is two different cities. Yes, there are Arab neighborhoods and Jewish Israeli neighborhoods, but the reality of Jerusalem is that we have become so interdependent in the city that neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis can say we are going to get rid of each other. So the challenge is, can we come together for a different vision of Jerusalem in the future? I rest it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sabel. I guess, just as a Christian, I just feel sometimes we are left out, when Jerusalem, it is not ours, where our Lord Jesus Christ is the only one, only prophet was there, in physically, and even all his life was there. And I feel that we should share it, and we want to be shared Jerusalem, Muslims with Jews, not just it's one Jewish city or that. If we have East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem and the capital of Palestine and the capital of Israel, and at least that we have a chance to be in Jerusalem and to claim it for ourselves, because we need that, for peace. Father McDonough, would you answer
Sure.
Shahir?
Shahir, thank you for bringing up the other text of Proverbs, because it ties with a thought that I was reflecting on this morning. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Some people say we look on Jerusalem as we love Jerusalem. I remember a group of senators came to the Patriarchate, U.S. senators, and mentioned to the previous patriarch, they said, we love Jerusalem and we love Israel. And he said, well, let me ask you this. Any mother who loves her child is out of order. If you love her that much, or your child that much, you're going to employ some form of discipline. So why don't you bring some form of discipline? To come back to the spare the rod, spoil the child, what the Western nations have been doing with Israel so far is handing them carrots. But we've run out of carrots. The only thing that remains is the stick. If an organization called the UN could, with the help of England and the United States, establish the modern state of Israel, and I've no problem with Israel having a state, but if they could make that decision abroad and impose it, then why can't they take that decision now and say, you've had long enough, 70 years, to get your act together to resolve this difficult situation. Since you've not been doing it, we're going to do it for you. It's time for a little bit of testosterone to rise up, and truth and honesty and integrity, and no more of this foolish so-called diplomacy, which isn't true diplomacy at all. In fact, it's insult, adding insult to insult, and they don't mind it. And my second point, and I won't delay on it, Rathab, is this. We appeal so often, the majority of this, are irrelevant when it comes to government. The majority of Germans did not go along with what was doing in world. The majority of Chinese didn't matter when Mao Zedong was there. The majority of Japanese were irrelevant when it came to what Japan did in murdering millions. The same in Russia. It's irrelevant to talk about what the majority want. The majority are not in power. The ones in power have to be dealt with, and only constant hitting with truth will do it. And not just earthbound truth that's operative in the secular realm. There has to be some to the supreme sovereign God who has the power to say, earth, be quiet. You know, our earth, I'm going to shake the heavens and shake the earth. He has that power. But if we believers don't elevate our faith in him to do something, then we're the powerless ones. So that's what I think we have to realize. It's time for the stick. No more carrots left in the bag. That's the only option until some leaders speak that and mean it and follow up with it. We're not going to see a solution. We certainly don't want to divide Jerusalem. Nobody is dividing it except one particular group who decide your monthly waste management is what? It's a bonfire. Would you like that kind of management of your waste? You wouldn't take that, would you? Not at all, but that's what it is. No sidewalks. Would you handle that well? No playgrounds for your children, except one scattered someplace far away from where it should be. 2,000 schools are needed in East Jerusalem. I mean, all these kids they can't attend because the classrooms are overcrowded. This should be hammered home. And as Dr. Sabella says, many things are not being conveyed to the West, to Europe, to Australia, to the United States that need to be. So put a little bit of fire under your leaders. There's a lot of it going on these days. But you will get burned if you go with fire. But that's okay. As an Englishman says, you get much cleaner in hot water than in cold water. So hop into the hot water.
Just hold on. Thank you, Father. You know, I think Dr. Shahri have to take his message today. And Shahri is the deputy mission for the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in the United Nations. And this is message about United Nations. Maybe you can take it all over as you are all day there. We can take one more question. You know, for whoever, huh? Yes. But we need one more question. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Anybody has any question? No? Looks like, you know, you fulfilled your assignment very well, and thank you very much, Father and Dr. Sabella. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Excellent.
Just
Thank you.
want to remind every speaker comes here that this is on Facebook Live and on YouTube. You know, a lot of people are sharing and listening to your conversations, and I have a lot of comments. That's what I'm following up on in case they have questions too from outside. Thank you very much, Elias. Saliba, please.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Now we move on to the next session, What Jerusalem Means to Us, Christian Perspectives and Reflections. And we have with us the moderator, Ilyas Sabura,
who is an HCEF board member and a lawyer in DC and elsewhere in the metropolitan area here. Elias.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to introduce our panel speakers, but before I do that, as I was driving here today, before I was a lawyer, before I was a board member for HCEF, I was a Jerusalemite. I think it's an honor to have the name Jerusalemite. Not too many people share that in common with me, except Saliba here that I know, who's present, and Dr. Sabella as well. But more importantly, what I want everybody to think about when we hear the panelists today is I'm thinking of words about Jerusalem as I was driving here today. What it means to all of us. It might mean churches, crucifixion, resurrection, ascension, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Via Dolorosa, the Holy Sepulchre, the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the church bells, the calls to prayer, often together, loud noises on the streets, spices, merchants, welcome. That's a word I always heard in the city as you walking by. But I also think of walls, I think of stones. The only good thing about the walls in Jerusalem, they all have gates, multiple gates, always open. It's a holy city. It's a city of stones, maybe the city of living stones. It's a city of peace, but it's also a city of war. And when I say war, I think the history of Jerusalem has always been a history of war. Of course, I think of the new and the old and the east and the west and the pilgrims and the patriarchate, not one, not two, not three, but multiple patriarchates. Gethsemane, Notre Dame, Dormition Abbey, Sitna Maryam, and the new gate, the old gate, the Damascus gate, so on and so forth. Those are the words I was thinking about as I was driving here today. And with that, I'm going to ask to join me on the panel Father Drew Christensen. Where do I start? Father Drew, come on up. He's a distinguished professor at Georgetown University. Father Christensen is co-founder of HCEF, a distinguished professor of ethics and global human development at Georgetown University, and senior research fellow at the Georgetown Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. He has taught at the Jesuit School of Theology at Berkeley and the University of Notre Dame. He was the editor-in-chief of America, the U.S. Jesuit Weekly. I don't need to read the rest of his biography, but it goes on and on and on. But I think the most important part that caught my eye is that Father Christensen was invested as a canon of the Holy Sepulchre by the Patriarch Michael Sabah. The next speaker we have is Ambassador David Mack. Ambassador Mack, how are you today? Ambassador Mack is the scholar, Middle East Institute, and elder at the National Presbyterian Church in Washington, D.C. Please join us. Ambassador Mack is the scholar at the Middle East Institute, which is a Washington-based educational organization. Very knowledgeable about the Middle East and about Jerusalem. I know that for a fact. From 1998 until 2008, Ambassador Mack was the vice president and acting president of the MEI. As a private consultant from 1995 until 1998, Ambassador Mack provided policy guidance to foreign governments and companies regarding their dealings in the United States and advises U.S. corporate clients and trade investment opportunities in the Middle East and North Africa. I can go on and on and on. His biography is written in this. And the last but not least, Dr. Saliba Sarsa. Where do I start? Where do I start? First and foremost, he's a Jerusalemite, a fellow Jerusalemite. I'm going to start with that. But he is a professor of political science at Monmouth University and is a chair of the HCEF's Research and Publication Committee. And for many years, while he doesn't like to admit it, he was a board member as well at HCEF. He is born and raised in Jerusalem. He received his doctoral degree from Rutgers University in political science with specializations in Middle East affairs. He is the author and co-author of several books, articles, and commentaries in the national and international media, and is a co-editor of the Patriarch Michel Sabah, Faithful Witness. On reconciliation and peace in the Middle East and the Holy Land, he was featured in the New York Times, his mission, Finding Why People Fight, a witness to Mideast conflict turns to dialogue and peace. Among his awards in the Holy Land, among his awards is the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation Award. I'm sure he has many other awards that we don't need to mention, but his biography is also included. Dr. Sarsa, please join us. The subject, of course, is Jerusalem and what it means to us as Christians, or non-Christians for that matter. Go ahead.
Okay.
Ambassador.
Everybody hear me well? All right. Unlike others at this conference, I cannot call Jerusalem my home or even the home of my ancestors. I didn't even live in the city for as long as a year, almost about 9 months, and I've been back from time to time. Nor is Jerusalem really the center of my Reformed Protestant faith. Nor have I committed in all the ways that other people here have committed to the political future of Jerusalem and its economic prosperity. But like many Christians and Jews, even a brief time in the city leaves some indelible impressions. First, personal. A woman that I had known in graduate school agreed to marry me when I was still on my first assignment with the U.S. State Department in Baghdad, after having spent a year in Cairo as a Fulbright scholar. And that was the conclusion of a 4-year romance that was interrupted when I went away forever to Cairo, and then when I went away forever to Baghdad. But I continued to write letters to her, and she read them with what seemed to me to be of interest. And fortunately also, I decided that being a bachelor diplomat in the Arab world was not such a good idea.
I can attest to that.
The trip to the wedding altar was not smooth. Urgently reassigned to Amman, Jordan, unable to go back to the Boston area for a wedding, a blessing in some respects. I asked her to fly out for the ceremony. Fortunately for me, she bought a one-way ticket and did so. After she arrived in Amman and I checked her into the Intercontinental Hotel, I said, oh my gosh, I've got to find a church, or at least a pastor who will marry us. Well, I knew that the various Catholic churches in Jordan, primarily Arab congregations, were not about to marry two Protestants. I asked a a Palestinian Orthodox friend of mine about it, and she assured me that Orthodox churches wouldn't do it either. So I went to the only Protestant church in town, which was the Anglican church. And I told the vicar that I had been baptized as a Methodist. My wife had been baptized as a Congregationalist. And he said, well, maybe he would be able to do this. But of course, we would have to post bans. Bans? I asked, with all the innocence of a Oregon farm boy. Oh, yes, we have to be sure there's no impediment to the marriage. I said, well, how long will this take? Well, a matter of a few weeks, I think, just to be sure. I said, well, here's the deal. I'm just a vice consul at the U.S. Embassy, and my friend Elias knows what it's like to be a vice consul. I said, I don't earn very much money. It's costing me dearly to keep my fiancée at the Intercontinental Hotel. The temptation to ask her to move into my temporary apartment is huge, and I'm sure that the church would not want us to live in sin. You have a point there. We do have an archbishop in Jerusalem. Perhaps he could make an exception. Well, as a result of this friendly Anglican vicar and a flexible and helpful hierarchy in Jerusalem, I was able to go down to Jerusalem with my wife to be married in St. George's Church, which I think many of you know. My wife and I checked into the American Colony Hotel for one night with 2 single rooms, and then second and third night in a double room. So they knew what was up. And believe me, it was a wonderful way to start our honeymoon. And I'm happy to report that over 51 years later, I'm still married to the same woman. She still puts up with me, so it was clearly a blessing to be married in a holy city. The trip to the that causes me now to talk a little bit about the political side of my experiences in Jerusalem. After the June 1967 war, the State Department transferred us from Amman to Jerusalem, where I was to open a visa office. Visas had not been issued in Jerusalem since 1949. Visa applicants from the Arab side of Jerusalem had to go to Amman. From the Israeli side, they would go to Tel Aviv. I'd been doing visa work in Amman, primarily actually with Palestinians, with all Jordanians, but most of them who came to the visa office were Palestinians. And so I was chosen to do the job on a 9-month assignment. My wife and I were transferred to Jerusalem. When I was having consultations in Washington, I argued successfully that we should treat Israelis and Palestinians exactly the same, providing visa services to both at our Consulate General office on Nablus Road, not all that far from St. George's Church. I would recruit 3 additional employees to add to the existing Palestinian and Israeli local hires. And the 3 people that I recruited would have to know Hebrew and Arabic as well as English. From those who applied, we hired 2 Israeli Arab Christians and 1 Israeli Jewish woman of Iraqi origin. Add that to a consular waiting room where there were Hasidic Jews in side curls sitting next to Arab men in keffiyehs, and presto, we had a fully integrated Arab-Israeli office in Jerusalem. we held our breath. For Jerusalem in the summer of 1967, this was a very novel experience. Israeli Mayor Teddy Kollek wanted to have similar examples of a united Jerusalem in many areas of life, but he made no progress for the year I was there, and from what Dr. Sabella indicated, they haven't made much since. And even today, such examples of integration are not common. I want to tell one story about the Iraqi origin Jewish employee. Her name was Olive Sahur. I really loved Olive. She's a bit fiery at times, but she let you know what her views were. And she had come to us at a time when many Jewish immigrants to Israel from other Arab countries felt that they were being discriminated against by the predominantly European origin Israelis who tended to control both economic and political power. Well, she fit in beautifully with the Palestinian employees in our consular section. And she also got along with the Polish origin Israeli employee, a veteran of the Palmach in the 1948 war, who had been, and this woman, Mrs. Peleg, had been assigned to the consular office to help us get started. And the latter was both, Mrs. Peleg, was both a much needed interpreter from Hebrew to English interpreter, but also she could advise me on the Israeli society and so on that I was having that was a bit newer to me. And she would also assure people in the Israeli community that they would be safe to come to the Nablus Road office for consular services. Visiting years later, I found out that Olive Sahur had unconsciously created a few problems of public perception for the Consulate General. The Jerusalem Post had published an angry letter from an American Jewish visitor to Jerusalem who had gone to the Consulate General and reported back that the Consulate General would hire no Israelis, only Palestinians, and that the Palestinian personnel were rude to American Jews and to Israelis. When I asked the Consul General about this, he said, oh, it's Olive they're complaining about. Because the visitor had come in, she had seen this woman laughing and chatting with the Palestinians, and then an Israeli came forward for visa services, and she put on her Israeli personality. Being totally bicultural, she turned and said, yes, what do you want? So, you see, it's not always easy, even if you have the best of intentions, to avoid misunderstandings in cross-cultural communication, something I think all of you know about. So after my time in Jerusalem...
I'm going to ask what the conclusion.
Okay. My conclusion is we found out that Israelis and Palestinians could work together and cooperate very well if they had common goals. Getting a visa to the United States. I am sure that they can also work together if they approach the goals, for example, having a city that can be shared by people of 3 faiths and 2 nationalities as their capital. If they approach this in a spirit of mutual respect for the aspirations of the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mack. And if they worked for the Consulate General in East Jerusalem. Father Drew, be nice.
Thank you, Leah. I hope I'll be nice. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm delighted to see new faces as well as old, and hope you will continue to stay with HCEF in the coming years and help in ways you can to support the Christians of the Holy Land. My involvement goes back to about 1991, when I was just starting as head of the Bishop's Office of International Justice and Peace, their foreign office, as it were. And Patriarch Sabah then came for a visit and invited me to join him get to know the situation in the Holy Land firsthand. And from that, we built up a strong relationship, which is rather unique between the U.S. Church and the Latin Patriarchate, but also, at the request of the Vatican, putting together a coordination of bishops' conferences that supports the bishops of the Holy Land. So I got deeply involved in that work as a result of my friendship with him and his invitation to meet people all over the Holy Land, including Jerusalem. And for many years, until my legs kept me from taking long-distance flights, I called Jerusalem my second home. I want to talk about Catholic hopes for Jerusalem, in light particularly of the Holy See's position, and clarify for those of you who may still be confused about it. Many ancient civilizations have a place they identify as the center of the world. The ancient Greeks called it the navel of the world and identified it with the shrine of the Oracle of Delphi. The Japanese place it at Mount Fuji. In India, it is the Bodhi tree where Buddha was enlightened. In the Black Hill, among the Sioux, it's the Black Hills, and for the Quechua, it was Cusco in the Andes. The center of the world is a place where the four compass points meet, so where all peoples come together, and where heaven meets earth. In that respect, Jerusalem has a special standing as the site of divine human encounter, where God dwelled in a temple, where Jesus suffered, died, and rose again, where the prophet Muhammad rode to heaven. Even today, pilgrims converge from all over the world to a tight triangle enclosing the Western Wall, the Holy Sepulchre, and the Dome of the Rock. Jerusalem has special claim to be the navel of the world. Pope St. John Paul II believed that Jerusalem was blessed as the center of divine human encounter. His apostolic letter, Redemptionis Anno, written for the Holy Year of 1984, the late Holy Father, noting that Jerusalem is the place where Europe, Asia, and Africa meet, in which the redemption of the human race was accomplished once and for all, made the case that Jerusalem is a place where humanity finds its spiritual unity. He wrote, "As she is the homeland of the hearts of all spiritual descendants of Abraham, who hold her very dear, and the place where, according to faith, the created things of earth encounter the infinite transcendence of God, Jerusalem stands out as a symbol of coming together, of union, and of universal peace for the human family." The peace of Jerusalem longed for by Jews, Christians, and Muslims, St. John Paul believed, was essential to peace everywhere. The lack of peace in Jerusalem is likewise an impediment to peace elsewhere. Thus, St. John Paul made his own the cry of Isaiah, "For Zion's sake I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest, until our vindication goes forth in a brightness, and our salvation as a burning torch." He was convinced that the religious identity of the city, and particularly the common tradition of the monotheistic religions, can pave the way to promoting harmony among all those who in different ways consider the Holy Land, or the Holy City, as their own. To preserve the religious significance of the Holy City, Pope St. Paul VI in 1967 conferred a special international status for Jerusalem. The language has varied. Sometimes they've asked for a special status, others for an internationally guaranteed special statute. The status of Jerusalem as a place of divine encounter for the three Abrahamic faiths needs to be safeguarded, he argued, not unilaterally dictated by one state, but by international agreement with understanding of the sacred character of the city, its significance for peaceful interreligious relations, and its potential, from God's side at least, as a model of convivencia for Jews, Christians, and Muslims everywhere. I use convivencia because the English conviviality is too light. Convivencia comes from the Spanish, and for those of you know from the history of Al-Andalus, Andalusia, and its highlight days when Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived together there side by side in a fruitful harmony. When we look not just at the impasse in the Palestinian-Israeli relations, but also at the one-sided changes in facts on the ground in Jerusalem, that future seems very, very far away. But it's a hope we must hold firmly as part of the divine promise. I vividly remember Pope John Paul at the Interfaith Dialogue at Notre Dame de Jerusalem during the Jubilee pilgrimage in the Holy Year 2000. Impaired by Parkinson's disease, abandoned by his interlocutors, Sheikh Tamimi, who left after a fiery sermon, which inflamed the audience, and then having Rabbi Lau, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, stepping aside and refusing to assist him, the Pope humbly, but with determination, took 3 olive trees. It had been planned, all 3 were to plant, as symbols of peace, and unaided, planted them each by himself. The next day, the Jerusalem Post, no friend to the church at that time, commented that in Israel, many religious figures want to engage in politics, but that evening, the visitor from Rome taught everyone how religion can lead even in the toughest of conflicts. So the special internationally guaranteed statute is intended to keep alive the prophetic vision of Isaiah that God's holy mountain, Jerusalem, will be a house of prayer for all peoples. As Psalm 87 says, all call Zion mother. It's for that reason that the confrontation at the Haram al-Sharif this past summer was alarming. The struggles around the noble sanctuary prompted the 14 heads of churches in Jerusalem to issue a cry of alarm for continued respect for the historical situation, the legal status quo in the Muslim holy places. They weren't pleading for themselves, they were pleading for their Muslim brothers and sisters. They hoped not just to prevent further violence and avert the loss of a modicum of peace, but also against losing the inchoate promise of interreligious peace made possible by the status quo. Their plea was made to keep Jerusalem faithful to its name, City of Peace. Access to pilgrims from everywhere, including above all those from the state of Palestine, is a pillar of a special status for Jerusalem as a holy city. Just as important, however, is the viability and vitality of the 3 historic religious communities in Jerusalem. The continued coexistence of Christians and Muslims is threatened today by numerous legal measures on the part of the State of Israel and the confiscation of land, home demolition, discriminatory regulation of property so families cannot grow, the restriction and denial of residency permits, the breakup or forced migration of families, and so on. All these put a future in Jerusalem for Muslim and Christian Jerusalemites, all these in jeopardy, but especially for Christians. This is why the special statute would guarantee full civil and human rights for all residents of Jerusalem, not just for Israeli Jews, but for Muslims and Christians too. In the Catholic view, every exclusive claim to Jerusalem, be it religious or political, is contrary to the logic proper to the very city itself. I must confess to dismay that the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom threw up a wall of hostility to former Latin Patriarch Tual when he appeared there 2 years ago to address issues of residency and marriage, among others. The attitude of doubt and resistance was intolerable on the part of a supposedly impartial body dedicated to investigating the denial of rights and pursuing justice for oppressed religious minorities. I hope with a change of leadership, it may be possible for USERF to look once more at the plight of religious minorities in Jerusalem. That wasn't the first time. There was another time when they did an investigation. They came home, approved it. Cardinal McCarrick left town the next day, and Elliot Abrams was then chair, called around, that got people to revoke the report on Israel-Palestine, and it was gone. So it's been a persistent problem with that commission. You often still hear people reduce religious rights in Jerusalem to the question of access to holy places. That is still an issue, especially for Palestinians, the West Bank. But for the Holy See, religious rights are much broader. They include equality of rights and treatment of those belonging to the communities of the 3 religions found in the city, in the concept of freedom of spiritual, cultural, civic, and economic activities. Both individuals and communities must be able to live free and full lives, unimpeded in their normal lives by legal and administrative burdens rooted in ethno-religious prejudice. Finally, the Holy See proposes that a special statute will protect the historical heritage of the city, its historical and material characteristics, as well as its religious and cultural characteristics, must be preserved, they say. Perhaps today it is necessary to speak of restoring and safeguarding those still existing as well. In one version, some 20 years ago, and then Archbishop Turan's addressed to the Latin Patriarch and delegates on the principal Catholic bishops' conferences in October '98, he asked that he called for the preservation of the biblical landscapes surrounding the city, which was fast disappearing. Alas, building frenzies by both sides around Bethlehem, filling them with settlements and a few Palestinian housing developments, has eaten up most of the open space that gave visitors to Jerusalem a chance to see the biblical Israel. Even in West Jerusalem, the rural vistas at shrines like Ein Karen and the traditional sites of Mary's Wall, of Mary's visitation to Elizabeth, have been devoured by development and the peaceful ambience of the village transformed by busloads of tourists and day trippers. Perhaps environmental restoration and preservation of the biblical landscape might be something on which Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Christians and Muslims could collaborate as a first step on the way to a comprehensive peace. One can always hope. Like the UN with its partition plan for an internationally governed zone for Jerusalem, the Holy See understands that the future Jerusalem cannot be unilaterally dictated by one party and probably not negotiated by the two principal parties alone without international involvement. Here I speak in my own name, but I think the settlement of Jerusalem, especially issues related to the Old City and other religious communities across the wider city of Jerusalem, must have strong outside involvement from the international community, but not from the United States, which has too long been what peace analysts call an inside partial participant. As Pope John Paul wrote in Redemptionis Anno, it should be found with goodwill and farsightedness, a concrete and just solution by which different interests and aspirations can be provided for a harmonious and stable form and be safeguarded in an adequate and efficacious manner by a special statute internationally guaranteed so that no party could jeopardize it. As the psalmist says, let us pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Let us, along with St. John Paul, for the day on which we shall all be so taught by God, that we shall listen to him and listen to hear his message and be reconciled in Jerusalem. I think of the day on which Jews, Christians, Muslims will greet each other, he said, in the city of Jerusalem with the same greeting of peace with which Christ greeted the disciples after the resurrection. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Drew. Dr. Sarsar.
Let me begin by saying that Jerusalem is my city. She is and will always be the primary focus of my religious and spiritual life. She is where I was born and raised, where I took my initial breaths and saw first light. She is where I learned the alphabet and discovered right from wrong. The seeds of my own identity took root in Jerusalem. My earliest words and actions engendered meanings and significance that would later define who I am, what I believe, and what impact I may have on others. At the same time, Jerusalem is our city, it is our home. We sense stronger and more numerous connections than anywhere else in the world. We experience the Creator in our midst, and the earth is actually nearer to the heavens. On a clear summer night, we can touch the moon, even capture the stars. Without Jerusalem, we feel stranded. Without our collective care, she feels empty and purposeless. And as you well know, over the centuries, large segments of humanity have turned to her when pondering the meaning of life, death, and the hereafter, as is found to varying degrees in the three monotheistic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. For billions of believers and non-believers today, Jerusalem evokes old and new reflections. She gives fertile grounds to recollections, both pleasant and unpleasant, including moments of peace, but long durations of war, in a way scorched by fire and stained with blood. And we can name many a civilization or a ruler in terms of Canaanites, Jebusites, Israelites, Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Seljuks, Crusaders, Mamluks, Ottomans, and British, who have previously walked on her holy paths and tried to make her their home. But what remains of them are mostly archaeological ruins or archives. It's an important thought to keep in mind. In 1948, Jordan became the administrative ruling power in East Jerusalem, and Israel the administrative ruling power in West Jerusalem. Although Jordan and the Palestinians today have influence in East Jerusalem, the whole city is in Israel's hands since '67. So as you can tell, Jerusalem has very personal meaning to me, but that personal meaning is translated to humanity. It is where my religious, my spiritual meaning comes from. And so as I go through my understanding of Jerusalem and my love for Jerusalem, I can tell you outrightly that Christianity, even though I'm very fully aware of Islam and Judaism, Christianity has enfolded me in her arms from early age. But at the same time, I became fully aware of the other, of the different in my daily life, mainly the Arab, Palestinian, Muslim, and the Israeli Jew. My neighbors, several of my classmates and friends, and others I came in touch with outside my family and my church prior to and after '67 were Arab, Palestinian Muslims. Whatever transpired around us, both good and bad, impacted us in very similar ways, regardless of our religious affiliation. After 1967, I was introduced to Israeli Jewish culture and developed close friendships with Israeli Jews as well. So it is not just the one, it is all together that makes life pleasant, but also painful at times. While living in Jerusalem and even thinking about Jerusalem from far away. In time, and that's an important point I want to make, in time I began to understand and cherish the sacredness of Jerusalem to the other two Abrahamic faiths of Islam and Judaism, and the importance of Jerusalem to both the Palestinian and Israeli national communities. As a Christian, I can no longer think of Jerusalem without its Muslim and Jewish believers. The wall, the tomb, the rock, all three are symbols of faith, faith in the one God. As a Christian, I can no longer think of Jerusalem without its Palestinian people, Christian and Muslim, and without its Israeli people. Both national communities have rights and claims that must be addressed. Jerusalem is my home. She is our home. As a Christian, I feel at home in Jerusalem only when I know that my neighbors and my friends, broadly defined, are also feeling at home, unhindered by discriminatory treatment, despair, fear, or humiliation. If Jerusalem is to be truly at peace, then she has to be inclusive, with all her inhabitants able to enjoy a dignified life. She has to embody wholeness and caring for the other in order to express holiness. As is written in Matthew 22:36-40, a lawyer asked Jesus, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So I conclude my presentation just to let you know that the love for Jerusalem and the meaning that it embodies for all people, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, for Palestinians and for Israelis, has enabled us at HCEF with the support of the President, CEO Ratib Rabia, and several others, including Ilyas Sabura. We have come together to write a book focusing on the Christian perspectives and reflections, and it's called What Jerusalem Means to Us. So this symposium and the book go together. The actions that will follow the symposium and the book in terms of helping the people of Jerusalem all go together. So we have this book, What Jerusalem Means to Us, which will come out in spring 2018. Leaders who are from the religious, academic, community, organizational, and media realms are coming together to share their voice in a special book titled What Jerusalem Means to Us, belonging to different Christian denominations and originating from different corners of the earth, including Jerusalem itself, Palestine, Jordan, Ireland, Scotland, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the United States. They will share their views on Jerusalem, and there is a brochure out there giving you this announcement and also the names of people and others that will be added. We have about 25 people who will be contributing to this book. I'm planning to edit the book. I've already started actually editing the articles that we have received already, and we are really gratified. And I look forward on just a footnote for the day soon where I could edit another book, What Jerusalem Means to Us, Muslim Perspectives and Reflections, and What Jerusalem Means to Us, Jewish Perspectives and Reflections. Because Jerusalem as the city of peace for all is a message that we need to really push hard and tell people to wake up and realize that without us working together to achieve commonly held objectives of peace, of justice, of dignified life, there won't be peace in Jerusalem. So we need to really work together at the religious level, at the governmental level, at the community level to make that possible. Thank you for your attention.
Any questions? Because I do have one. Go ahead.
You could just wait for the mic.
Yeah. You can go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much to the organizers first for putting on this conference again. It probably deserves a greater audience than we have today because the subject matter is enormously important. I'm Eugene McCarthy. I do some work for the Holy See at present. I've visited some 90 countries, but unfortunately Jerusalem and Israel is not one of them, but I hope to rectify that. I have a very specific question, listening to the panel and to the earlier thing. I wonder whether, if one of the major players in reaching any kind of negotiation, you have a country such as Israel increasingly more secularized. You have a Europe that's increasingly more secularized. You have a North America that's increasingly more secularized. To what extent the appeal to the religious tradition is no longer as forceful as it might be in reaching an agreement on it? And that's just a general question mark for those of you who have observed it. I wonder then what is required. My sense is, looking at it from a distance and following it with great interest, is it almost requires a remarkable and courageous leader arising, frankly, out of Israel to be able to do this. I share Father Drew's views that I think the United States is really no longer going to be an effective leader, that it's going to require a different kind of approach, bringing in others as well. But the environment in which we live, I think, gives rise to great pessimism in terms of reaching a solution in the near term. I'm reminded, Father Michael earlier, he didn't address it, but having lived in the United Kingdom for quite a bit of time, there was despair in reaching peace in Northern Ireland when none of the people who were called Catholics in a place called Belfast could apply for housing loans. Nobody could join the police who was a Catholic for a long period of time. But eventually, peace did come. Peace could come to that through a courageous intervention. I don't want to make parallels with the situation. They're very, very different in many, many ways. But the elements that brought peace and at the end, I think there may be some common bonds there. So just a quick intervention from each of the members of the panel, in particular, whether first is the increasing secularization of Israel weakening the prospects for peace, that they're going to have a tough negotiation. This is land that we have had, and we don't care so much about the traditions that are there. And secondly, what does it require really in terms of the world leadership, not a specific country, to bring about peace in the next thing, which in my personal view, I think the prospects have diminished rather than increased. Thank you.
Would you like to start with that?
Yes, I might have a slightly different way of looking at that, Eugene. I don't think diplomats do a very good job of bringing peace between people whose primary motivation is religious. And I thought we had a much better chance, actually, of reaching Israeli-Palestinian peace as long as the two parties viewed their struggle as one of competing nationalisms, Zionism and Arab nationalism, or particularly Palestinian nationalism. Unfortunately, I think, the capture of Jerusalem and its retention with increasingly rigid and restrictive and exclusionist policies by Israel has turned that problem from one of competing nationalities to a problem of Jew versus Muslim, with Christians having complicated relationships with both sides. So, I mean, I could frankly use, and I don't deny that Israelis may have become, the majority of Israelis may have become more secular, but certainly the government is describing its vision and its policies in far more religious terms than they had described them earlier, and that is a big obstacle for diplomats, and it may require different kind of people mediating the problem.
I just want to add a comment, as with all due respect to the diplomatic view. Anywhere else in the world, secularism is very popular these days, except in the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem is the only city that has a direct connection with the heavens, with God, right? For all monolithic religions. So religion and Jerusalem cannot be separated. And my hope that Jerusalem will remain a symbol of our connection to God and our closeness to God. It's the only thing I laugh about. My wife makes fun of me is I keep reading on people trying to create the wonderful land of the Bible, or some amusement park about the Bible, or bringing the Bible to life. And I say, hang on, that's Jerusalem, right? It is where the Bible comes to life. It is where you go pray at the same place where the crucifixion occurred. It is the same place where you can go and pray at the place where the prophets have ascended into heaven. It is the place where you have the Temple of Solomon. It is the place where the Ark of the Covenant exists or existed. It is the place where you walk on the same streets that Jesus walked on. It is the place where it'll always be the city of hope. it is a place where there's always been war and conflict in Jerusalem, and yet people, when you walk down the streets, are always hopeful for peace. And the only reason that there is that hope is its closeness to God and its closeness to religion, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Jew. Next question.
Let me, if I may,
Please.
add. I think, as been said, the problem is, at this point, it's not so much the secularization of Israeli society. Many secular Jews were very helpful in the Clinton years in trying to resolve some of these questions. But the problem really is the rise of ethno-religious nationalism in Israel and in the ruling coalition. And Netanyahu has been willing to play that all along for many years. As I've said, in my experience, the church's problems with dealing with issues there only grew worse as in his terms as prime minister. Yeah, you could get somewhere with other people, but not with Netanyahu. He's a very cynical kind of player. And there you have that cynical kind of valueless secularism playing for advantage combined with ethno-religious nationalism. That's the real problem, I'd say. I'd also say be careful about generalizations about secularization. Secularization theory was great in sociology 25 years ago, but beginning with the work of Jose Casanova, there's been a lot of sociology that's saying, no, religion is alive, and that's an issue we have to deal with, that it's alive everywhere, and more alive than it's been in some cases. We have to look at that. As far as world leadership, it seems to me that we probably ought to look where we haven't looked. I don't think we should look to the Security Council members, except to block their interference. I was intrigued by being part of the UN negotiation over the treaty to ban nuclear weapons to discover that that treaty was put together by 122 non-nuclear powers and civil society. And you know, I learned from my UN friends, well, this partnership has been going on for a while, and it's moving ahead. And it seems to me that if we think that way, you know, not the big powers, but the little powers in combination, who understand very much the Palestinian question. I always found with the bishops, the first ones to understand it were the Hispanics, you know, or the blacks, among them, a few among them, but they understood the Palestinian immediately, had great sympathy for it. And so it seems to me that looking to that world majority and civil society, which is increasingly empowered, as ICANN was with the Nobel Peace Prize, it seems to me that's where the future of global governance and maybe peacemaking will be.
One last question.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Questions.
It is not a question, actually. The question has already been addressed by Drew, so I will not let this chance go without sharing a short story with you. When you were talking about the city that has walls and gates, this reminded me of something happened with me and my family last August. I'm West Banker, and when I went to Palestine, my little kids wanted to go to Jerusalem. And of course, we had a permit. The permit says that you should leave the city before 7 o'clock. And my son was very upset. He wanted to sleep the night in the city. But I had to tell him what Father Francis Mulligan told me 2 decades ago when I was studying at Bethlehem University, 3 decades ago, that we went to Jerusalem for a trip. And I wanted to sleep the night there like others. But he said, don't be upset. Just remember, Jesus did not sleep a single night in the city. He used to teach and preach in the city, and after sunset, he used to go and sleep at the Mount of Olives. Oh, that was very, very satisfactory for me at that time. When I told the story to my son, he said, okay, this is good for Jesus, but I'm not a Christian, I'm Muslim. Oh, I'm Muslim. So I told him, that's true also for Prophet Muhammad. He came to the city, he prayed, and the same night he went to the heavens. So what I wanted to share.
Your son didn't go to the heavens, did he?
No. But he almost got there. Thank you, Ambassador, Father, and Doctor, and we really appreciate you, and we're ready for the next panel.
All right, if you'll allow me, we need to rejoin so that we can start the next panel. This next panel focuses on new strategies for East Jerusalem, Palestinian economy, religious tourism, and developmental projects. And the moderator is Mr. Marwan Ahmed, President of the Arab American Business Council. Let me just let you know a little bio on Marwan. Marwan Ahmed is the founder and president of the Arab American Business Council since 2013. He is the president of Arabesque Media, a Virginia-based marketing and publishing company. Mr. Ahmed has a degree in computer information systems and additional education in marketing, TV producing, and nonprofit management. He has been in the marketing publishing business since 1994. He served on a media training mission to Italy with the State Department, touring 4 cities to speak, educate, train local ethnic media. Mr. Ahmed specializes in general marketing and publishing for business in the US, as well as companies that do business in the Middle East. His company's clients include State Department, Qatar Airways, and many others. He is also the co-founder of Arab Fest in Virginia, co-founder of Little Arabia in Anaheim, California, and publisher of the Arab American Voice and US Qatar Network. Mr. Ahmed received a number of awards from ADC Arizona, CARE Arizona, Attorney General's Award for Community Service Arizona, and American Muslim Women Association Arizona. And please welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Is it? Good morning. So, well, as mentioned earlier, we're going to speak about the new strategies for East Jerusalem, the Palestinian economy and religious tourism and development projects. So, despite the fact that Palestine is not an independent state with control over its borders, the Palestinian territories nevertheless attract significant number of tourists every year to its unique religious and historical sites. Tourism in Palestine can be divided into several types. First and foremost, religious tourism, thanks to the concentration of sites revered by the followers of the 3 great monotheistic religions. The current status of tourism in Palestine in general, and despite hard work by the Palestinian Authority to strengthen the tourism sector, including efforts by the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities to attract visitors from Latin America, Russia, Europe, tourist numbers declined sharply in 2015 following following an encouraging start of the first half of the same year. This was primarily due to violence that erupted in East Jerusalem and the West Bank at beginning of October. A report published by Palestinian media showed a drop in foreign visitors by approximately 11%, which is 2.23 million, compared to almost 2.53 million in 2014. This was in itself a decline over previous years due to the Israel-Gaza conflict that extended through the summer. The scale to the development of tourism. So tourism is an important but underexploited contributor to the Palestinian GDP. Since the establishment of the Palestinian National Authority in 1994, more attention has been given to the sector, with the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities dedicated to promoting tourism and maintaining archaeological sites. However, Israel has sought to discourage foreign tourists from visiting Palestinian territories by introducing deterrents such as lengthy questionings upon arrival and departure. Additionally, Israeli tourist companies have set conditions for groups visiting the Holy Land, one of them being that accommodation should be in Israeli hotels. All of this is possible because of Israeli control over airspace. The Tel Aviv Ben Gurion Airport is the only flight arrival point and borders crossing with its neighbors. This highly affects the development of tourism sector, and as a result, constant fluctuations in visitor numbers and income. Palestine has officially become a member of the World Tourism Organization, as announced during the International Conference on Religious Tourism held on 15th of June 2015 in Bethlehem, and attended by political figures from around the world. The PA has campaigned for membership since Palestine was recognized as a non-member observer state in the UN at the end of 2012, in the hope that the membership would enable it to overcome the obstacles impeding the growth and development of tourism sector. In 2017, Palestine has seen a great growth in tourism, and that started from the mid of 2016. And it put it on the top 10 attractions in the world for foreign tourism. But there is also great growth in what's known as the alternative tourism to Palestine, which is by people who come to see the Palestinians from its perspective and its side. So those alternative tourists go to Palestinian areas, and they don't go to the traditional tourist sites with traditional groups, so they understand the conflict. And it's a growing industry. And to talk in depth and in more details about tourism in Palestine and its development, I'd like to invite Mr. Ratib Rabia, who is the founder and president and CEO of the Holy Land Christian Economical Foundation, to give us more insight on this topic. Please, welcome.
Now I can say good morning and good afternoon. It's between, that's, I have to make sure that I will wait for a minute, say good afternoon. Okay. Thank you very much for being here. This is, tourism. We were supposed to talk about development and projects in East Jerusalem, but actually, the tourism is the oil of Palestine or the Holy Land. That's where most income comes from that. It is the major industry in the Holy Land in Palestine. I want to talk about East Jerusalem because it is the attention, all of it. Last July I was invited by the UN and Organization of Islamic Cooperation to speak about the Christian tourism to East Jerusalem in Azerbaijan. And this was something exciting. I have the same presentation, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit to suit the American way, how we can find ways how we can support East Jerusalem while we are sitting here and doing a lot of advocacy and talking about the problems and how we can solve it, and talking about who could involve in that. you can do something about it, as HCEF has about 20 programs. One of them is the Livingstone's pilgrimage, because we found out this is when we take people there for the first time without any propaganda, makes a difference. They come back on fire, they come back as volunteers, and we don't have to tell them what's going on. If you have the heart and the mind, that means you become a pro peace and justice, which is happening now. You know, the Palestinian needs peace and justice. I want to start my presentation with about Jerusalem, focusing on that, because this is something you'll understand what the problem and how we can go about it. This is, let me get something, you know, this is about Jerusalem. Everyone has claiming Jerusalem, it is theirs, you know. But, you know, as I said earlier, as Christians, we feel this is very important to us, because everything we read the Bible as Christians and we do whatever we do, it is about Jerusalem. But, you know, as we like to share it, and, you know, and should be for all of us. What are the challenges facing East Jerusalem? 3 phases. One is the development, integration, and gentrification. And I will speak about a little bit about each one of them, you know, because this is what affecting East Jerusalem and why we are doing that. Because we are with Jerusalem, it is our identity, our roots, and always we say as Christians, you know, some Christians, I think, you know, it's all started in Rome, or it started in England, or started wherever, as we belong to different denominations. But it's all started in Jerusalem. I'm talking about Jerusalem is the mother church. I don't want to talk about it as in the Catholic contents, but it is as a Christian. This is all what we have to start there. And as you know, the Palestinian, the Arab Christians, the whole first who follow Jesus Christ. We are not converts. We are there since the beginning, and we have our history and our roots into Jerusalem. That doesn't mean, you know, that mean we wanna have Jerusalem as a Christian city. No. We don't want that. We need it to be for the Arabs, for the Jews they can be there because they were there too. But our original things, the Palestinian Christians, the Arab Christians, and if you look at Act 2, 11 to 16, the Arabs were there. And always somehow you go to church, they read the Bible, they skip that page. Why? I don't know. Anyway, you know, let's talk about the development. You know, the way it is now, the Israelis, they do little to improve East Jerusalem. And it is under their management. They are the one, the municipality of Jerusalem does everything in Jerusalem except East Jerusalem. That means most of the Palestinians are not having the benefits of having a municipality really taking care of them. And this is where, that's where they are affecting them. They don't have the services. They don't have any support, except that they pay the same taxes as the Israelis pay, you know, taxes, but they don't get the benefit out of it. As we are here in any county, in any city, we pay taxes. If the collection of the trash didn't come, we raise hell. And over there, we pay taxes and nothing happening to us. And this is what I can see. They develop the, you know, the area of East Jerusalem. And the second phase is, you know, what we call it Israelization of East Jerusalem. That means now, if you've been in Jerusalem in the old days and now, you see things changing. You know, we started seeing all Jewish, you know, language, Hebrew language, and then now we have Arabic, English, and Hebrew. But now they're saying the Arabic language no longer is an official language as that, you know, and we are afraid they're going to take the Arabic language from the streets of Jerusalem, because everybody's going to go to Hebrew language and English just for tourism, but they want to take the Arabic, that's which can affect us and affect our identity. And these are some of the things, you know, we feel, still I'm with the first phase. Okay, here's the second phase. You know, can I put the second phase, please? you know. They have negative effect on us. You know, we have, you know, I can read this, but I can tell you from my experience with that, because I'm back and forth as our offices in Bethlehem, and we have worked in Jerusalem as we created the Jerusalem projects to see how we can give the identity of the Palestinian Christian inside the city. Now we started as Christian in our holidays, Christmas or Easter or all of that. In Jerusalem, yes, the Boy Scouts, they used to go out and do all the marching and do the celebration, all that. Now we start raising the Palestinian flag in order to show that this is ours too. We need to share it. You know, we have a very nice faith where we are looking at it as, you know, let's share it with the Israelis. Already the Muslims are sharing it, but sometimes we have some Muslims that just feel it is for them too, but no, it is for Palestinians, and this is where we need to make sure it is for all of us. And this is very important, that then we cannot say the Israelization of Jerusalem, it is just for the Jewish, it is not for all if we want to live in peace, because the rest of the world, they look at it as the center point. It is the mother church. And the third phase is what we call a gentrification, where they are pushing into the city more settlers, and this is reduce the number of Palestinians. In this way, you know, the city become more Jewish than Palestinian. When I say Palestinian, Muslim and Christians, you know, because I cannot keep saying, you know, Palestinian and Christian, because we are the same people. We have everything the same with history, language, culture, everything except the faith. That means, you know, we were saving Christianity for 2,000 years. The Islam came in the 7th and the 8th century, but the Islam, the Muslims, they were Palestinian, they were saving the Christianity for over 2,000 years. Yes, we are there to stay and stick there because other missionaries, you know, we have a lot of Christians, a lot of missions goes there, but they come in and out, but we stay there. Still history, like, you know, you look at the people from Jerusalem, they are into the land, into the presence of the Christians. You know, of the presence of Christians and Palestinian into the city, and the number of Christians now, it is less than 10,000 people. We were over 51% at one time in the 1920 and up, you know, then the number is reduced. As you can know, we have about 500,000 Palestinian Christians in Chile. We have 200,000 in Honduras. I have one volunteer here with me from Honduras. I took her to Palestine for the first time, and now she's permanent volunteer. Don't think it's because he can leave at any time, okay? And here he is another gentleman from Chile. You know, he was born there, and his dream about going to Palestine. He's from Beit Jala as she is too. I hope I'm right. Okay, I don't want to mix between, because you are Bethlehem, Beit Jala, Beit Sahur, always having that problem, you know, where you are belong to, what city you belong to. Anyway, the separation war, this is one of our problems there, you know, because, you know, we mention a lot, you cannot visit here and there. I go to Palestine, I go to Bethlehem, where is my office. I go with my people who are working for me, and we go through the Palestinian roads, and all of them stopped at Israelis, you know, because in some area you have to go through that. You can see when they stop us the fear in their eyes, the fear if they can go through or not, the fear of the occupation, you know, and all of that is there, but they have to carry on with their lives. They cannot, life goes on, but they are very strong, you know, by saying we need to continue our work, we need to build Palestine, we need our freedom, and this is what I all look for. You know, I'm taking the point of Palestinian Christians because people will listen to us more than if I'm Muslim. I mean, this is fact. We open doors about the situation. I just came back from Utah. I was invited to speak at BYU, Brigham Young University, and everybody called me, you know, just to talk about why the Christian leaving the Holy Land, and all waiting, you know, how I'm gonna trash the Muslims. You know, I said no, we are not left because of the Muslims. And we are there because of the occupation. And you know, the thing here is, after I finished, only one person, when I told them, we want to change our image. We are not terrorists, because as whoever is American here, you know, like, you know, Bill, you know, your ancestors were terrorists at one time, you know, when they were fighting the British occupation. But, you know, that's you know, this is where, you know, we are now freedom fighter, but, you know, on the other side, we are tourists, we are not. We have culture, heritage, and we have language, we have everything. And this is why we are going to have next year at BYU the Museum of People and Culture of the Palestinian people, from the eyes of the Palestinian Christians, in order to accept us. It's going to be for the whole school year over there, exist there, and we're going to show our heritage and culture from A to Z. Other things, you know, when I addressed the church itself, the Mormon church itself, I was thrilled that they want to work with us. They want to help everyone in Palestine, Muslim and Christians, because they have a university there. They have the Jerusalem Center there, and they want some help to the Palestinian, and they want to utilize HCEF in order to get the benefits of the church to them. And this is what I said in my presentation to the church and to the students. The only way is to change things is the united Christians, united churches, in order to have one voice for peace and justice. Even I told them, I'm Palestinian, but I don't take sides. Not the sides of Palestinians, not the sides of Israelis. I take the sides of peace and justice. It just happened to be now the Palestinian needs peace and justice. Here is the quality of life in the old city. You know, 12% unemployment in the old city. 54 the number of stores that closed. In the souk, if you know that, I don't want to go into details, but this is in the old city, you know, the stores closed. 81% the share of Palestinian East Jerusalem residents living below poverty line in 2014 versus 28% of Jewish residents in the old city. Moreover, where are we? Okay. Look at the nice things where they do nice things for the west of Jerusalem, West Jerusalem. They do things, the nice things, you know, for themselves, but not for us to show that, you know, for our side of the city. Israeli tourism, another map, you know, where see how you know the sites, you know, they are omitting the Palestinian sites and omitting a lot of things. And most of the sites there, it's Christian more than anything else, you know, for all over the city. All the above, you know, that affect the seasonal tourism, which usually mostly it is in the spring and in the fall, where really that most of the tourism, and we're trying to get the tourism on the summer to encourage more Palestinians or Arabs to go there, especially Palestinians, because I have another program, you know, I have brochures out called Know Their Heritage. I take every year 40 young people from all over the world with Palestinian origin, you know, fourth, fifth generation for the first time, in order to connect them with the land. And when they go there, this is another tourism. We need now to change that to tourism to get all the Palestinians who have the fear to go there. We want to facilitate that for them to go and visit, and to start visiting in the summer, because the hotels are cheaper, and we're trying to get them there in order to see Palestine, see their homeland, because a lot of people, they just gave up, or they are scared or fear to go, but it's not, you know, if you want to get there, you can get there, and we can help people to get to the area. And to the Islamic tourism, because now the Israeli becoming Muslims than the Muslims themselves. You know, they start bringing Muslims from Indonesia, Malaysia, India, you know, just to come to Jerusalem through them. Why we don't do that, you know, as a Palestinian, to encourage other Muslims to come in order to support the city, because supporting the city support our Christianity too, because we are selfish too. We want you to come and stay in East Jerusalem because most of the tourism are run by Christians, and this is why we want them to come to East Jerusalem. Well, do you have any, because you are Muslim and you have interest in that, do you have any thoughts on this subject, Marwan?
Yes, of course. In 2009, I visited Palestine and I spent about a month in Jerusalem. And first thing I noticed that there is a lot of tourism, of course, a lot of groups coming from all over the world, and mainly focusing on Christian pilgrimage. There was a huge lack of Muslim visiting the city of Jerusalem. There were only a handful, looked like from Southeast Asia, and I'm not sure with whom they came, but I can probably guess it's either an Israeli group or they came on their own. And also noticed another thing, that the shops, Palestinian shops in East Jerusalem, have been shut down earlier and earlier every year, to the point that they're suffocating economically. So I came back from that trip with the conclusion that, you know, we need, one more thing I noticed, that those Christian groups that were there were also brought by either Israeli groups or tour guides that narrate the story of Israel, not our side of the story. It doesn't have to be a political story. It could be a historical and cultural story, but they're not hearing our side. So there is a lot of brainwashing taking place. So I came back from that trip deciding that I'm going to encourage all my friends and family who can visit, you know, Palestine and Jerusalem to go there, spend some time, stay in Palestinian hotels, eat at Palestinian restaurants, take a Palestinian cab, buy from a Palestinian gift shop, and strengthen the economy through tourism. This is one way of resistance that I believe that is available to us and we're not utilizing. Now, to speak about the Islamic tourism, I think Ratib and I agree that there's huge potential, there's a huge opportunity, and there is a lack of organizing these kind of groups. And as Mr. Ratib mentioned, that Israel is capitalizing on this by organizing their own tours for the Muslims. We need to take charge, we need to be responsible, and we need to organize our own tours to Palestine and Jerusalem and to narrate our own story. And yeah, Ratib and I think agree on this, and we're working on something, inshallah, in the near future.
Thank you, Marwan. You know, this is where the Vatican, as the only country really recognize the state of Palestine, and they have ambassador in the Vatican itself, which encouraging us to work on the tourism, to work on the economic developments, because that's their interest, because of the Christians, and for peace in that land. And this is what we are following Pope Francis' vision of improving the economic situation into Jerusalem and into the Holy Land, in order to bring peace and bring prosperity. Prosperity bring peace. This is the way it is, you know. And just back, I want to go several. I don't want to bore you with number of rooms dropped, and a lot of hotels are closing. We cannot open new hotels, but we need to revive all of that, and to bring people are coming to the area. Even when I talk about this, I'm talking about Bethlehem. Bethlehem now, yes, they have a business. The Israelis, they bring that business just for the hotels. And they come because it's cheaper than what they put them in Jerusalem. And at the same time, you know, the people in general, they don't get benefit of tourists when they come to Bethlehem, because they just come to the nativity, they visit it, and then they go back, or they go to the hotel, they stay for $20, $25 per night, and they go back, and the Israeli is making most of the money. And this is where I'm looking at it in different way. Hey, you know, I want you to come down. I want you to spend money. We started last year, the year before, we started the Bethlehem Museum. to give them something else in order to see the heritage and culture of the Palestinians through the eyes of the Palestinian Christians. We need to see, we want to make it as a second destination after the Nativity. The Nativity didn't survive all these years by itself. People were behind it. Like I said, the Palestinian people, Muslims and Christians. And this is where we want that. The good thing is all of that, now we start working with the Jewish who has the hearts and the mind, and they find out that we can all live together and do something together. And when I talk about the Israelis, it's different than talking about the Jewish, because a lot of people like us, they want to help. And we are meeting with them and discussing, and they want more services, and they give us advices what we should do regardless of their government restrictions. Anyway, here is a few things about steady decline, the suffering of Jerusalem, decline in the number of hotel establishments, room capacity, tourist services, tourism, bus transport, souvenir shops. Because East Jerusalem doesn't have a government to support them. They cannot go on their own. They don't have, to put their heads together in order to help that tourism in East Jerusalem. And this is opportunity for tourism through international strategies and protection, preserving of Palestinian culture, identity, and existence in East Jerusalem. And this is, this is what we have as a way of preserving the Palestinian identity through Bethlehem Museum. Is even a small one, but the idea is how we can bring the artifacts the Palestinians took with them when they flee Palestine. How we can make it happening, that show our good culture and heritage. The other thing, how we can support the existing establishments, hotels, souvenir shops. They are suffering, and that's what we need, more people to come. And the people, they come there. They come to Bethlehem, over 2 million people, into Bethlehem, but they don't spend money. They just come in and out. That's why we are talking to churches, talking to leaders here, let them stay 1, 2, 3 nights. We don't want to take over the Israeli tourism, but let them say the churches ask their parishioners, congregation, stay for 2 nights. That makes a difference for us as a Palestinians, because we are very few there, and we don't need a lot of what they are, the Israeli. We will be happy at this moment to have that. And this is what we are looking do that. And then the third one is capacity building of both individuals and businesses and organizations, by training, by showing them the right way, and how they can develop their industry. Opportunity for tourism through international strategy. We need new products, challenges. Like I was saying, in the summer we could focus on the local, domestic, and the Palestinian tourism. Then other things, how we can all the various sectors work together. That's in order to build the economy in Palestine, where all stop being each one working on their own, to have collective efforts to work for the Palestinian economy. Then we need packages. We need, beside the religious tourism, we need different type of tourism, health tourism. We have the Dead Sea. We have other type of tourism, the ways, where you can, Masarat, they call it, you can walk in Palestine all over. There is very nice things happening, but all that needs, the involvement of churches, of people, because this is tourism is always peaceful. It is something where all we agree on. Even the Israelis, companies, they are interested because they will make money, and they are willing. That will be a way to bring peace to the land there. Then we have women and youth partners in building a unique and viable tourism industry, and this is HCEF now. We have a center in Birzeit, north of Jerusalem. It was for the senior citizen. We use it only 3 times a week, for the senior citizen. Now we change it. We call it now Birzeit Social Development and Cultural Center, in order to service the senior citizen, because this is in the morning. Then we have the youth and we have the women, because they need that type of support and starts working with the international community. We need volunteers to go there with their expertise. We need people to help us in building that center. We have the center, we have the people. It just need ideas. We need people to involve, and not just to keep going to conferences and symposium and say, we want to help the Palestinians, want to do this. Everyone can do something. It doesn't have to be a big money. It could be a little bit of money. We can make a difference there, because the Palestinian people are ready to do a lot of work, and they are very smart, and they are very determined that they can rebuild what they lost for years. Here are some of the things we need, the opportunities for tourism through international strategies. You know, this is something we need to push for. You know, we need to put Jerusalem, East Jerusalem on the map. It is for not just as Jerusalem as for Israel. It is East Jerusalem for the Palestinian. The Christians are there who are really, and the Muslims are there, you know, but mostly the Christians are who are mostly 84% of the industry run by Christians there. Open Palestinian tourism centers, you know, around the world, you know. Like we need to have the tourism centers, bureau in every country where they can promote, you know, that type of tourism in these respective countries all over the world. We are all over the world. Why not to have an office about tourism in every country, and you know, use the Palestinian embassy or not, you know, but has to be doing some marketing rather than sales, because this is what our travel agents, because you don't have anybody to organize them, and that they just use sales, what I can get for me, not for Palestine, but that's, you know, in return get to Palestine. But we need to make offices where encourage people to go through the Palestinian tourism and go through Palestinian, you know, buy from Palestinian stores, and that will help, because we are not going to affect that Israeli tourism. It's just going to reduce a little bit to get some income for the Palestinians. Again, I feel that the local churches, more than mosque, you know, because we are connected, you know, with the churches. We don't utilize the churches in order what we want to do. I was in a conference with UNWTO, you know, for a conference in Lebanon about regional tourism. And my idea is, why don't we work with the churches? Connect people who comes to the Holy Land, even include through the Israeli tourism. Why we not connect them with the churches, where the churches can explain to them, because they know what pilgrims coming. They know the products they are looking for, these pilgrims. We have it. Why we not connect them, you know, to have some support through them in order to survive and help the people who are the churches are the main source for the people there, for Muslim and Christians, because Christianity help everyone there. You know, whoever knock on the door, they help. But why we don't help the churches into having this support and connect tourism with the churches, and both they can hear the story and get the funding and get the support from pilgrims to the churches, and the churches in return is going to help the people there. You know, because you cannot do everything on the level of business or NGOs, but the churches can already committed to help the people who are there. And we have a lot of churches, you know, who are helping us to help the churches there. It's like I talk about the National Presbyterian Church, which have 2 representatives here. So not because you are here I'm talking about, because since HCEF started, they gave us a home, and this is for over 20 years. And this is where we are and why we developed ourselves, when we feel we have churches supporting us as a Palestinian Christian and help everybody. They are not telling us, I'm helping you just to help the Christian. They are telling us, help everybody. You have the eyes, you are on the ground. This is what you need to do. And this is what we ask churches to work with us and help us in what we do. Promote religious directly with the churches. Now, I didn't stop that to go to the travel agent. Travel agents look at you. If he makes money, he will work with you. If not, you know, go somewhere else. I'm going to the churches directly. This is what each church has to look at. You know, why the churches don't choose some travel agencies, choose churches where they can work directly with them. Because you know, the church is the client, and the client always right, and you have to do what the client is asking. We are asking them to work with I'm just keep putting HCEF as example because this is what we do. But if the church tells us, I want to go to this place and that place, I want to see this, then we do that, and everybody get the benefit because we're going to spend their money somewhere there, but that will benefit the Palestinian sector into that. And this is now working. You know, we are blessed with the Archdiocese of Washington. We are blessed with the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and we have now work on archdiocese by archdiocese. I say archdiocese still we have, because when you get archdiocese, you go to all the churches. It's like, you know, franchise. But we know with the Protestant, you have to go to church by church, like pop and mom businesses. You know, you have to go one by one in order to succeed in each church. Because even within the church, at the Protestant churches, is going, you know, that by you know, they go by church. You know, if the pastor doesn't make the decision like in the Protestant, like the priest, pastor priest, because they have the elders and they have all of that. You need to convince more. But if you get their endorsement, wow, you know, that's in, you are on fire. You go for it. I'm gonna try to finish because he's telling me even if you are the president, you know, you have to stop doing that. Oh, I'm not gonna have it. Anyway, this is what we have. We ask every organization, every place, every church to think about ways of how we can do that and how we can help the tourism in East Jerusalem, because this is where we can make peace, we can help people and do all that stuff. I stop here. If we have time for questions and answers, I'll be happy. And you,
is there any questions among the audience, whether about Christian tourism or Muslim tourism or tourism in general? Please. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, it's good.
My name is Safi Hamid, and I'm a professor, and I live in Maryland. I want to talk about the Muslim tourism. There is a watershed in the Muslim world. I hope our friends in Palestine are realizing it, which is the 1.5 billion Muslims which have been sort of passive or neutral in the past about the rulers since the spring, the Arab Spring, have shifted completely. There is complete distrust and disbelief about their leaderships, political and religious. Being from Egypt originally, I can say that easily. The authority of all those clergy, which have been proven over the years that they are puppets for the regimes, have, for instance, stopped many Egyptians from going to Jerusalem, although to them it's a sacred place where you should travel and pray. And therefore, I think it will be good for the tourism if an American company or American outfit, where there is a coordination between Muslim Americans and Christian Americans, to allow that to happen by organized trips, just because to Muslims, just like going to Mecca, if you can afford it and physically afford it and financially, going to Jerusalem and praying at the Haram al-Sharif or Masjid al-Aqsa is so significant. And therefore, I think it will be a good additional business, but realize that the enemies could be the governments of many of these countries, which now are distant from their people, and that is dangerous for the future. Also, you have to plan for it. What will happen if those 1.5 billion will
Can we
do
have
what
the
they're
question, please? You know, because
the question is about what will is there a possibility of an American business, both Muslim and Christian together to facilitate, take Muslims to the Holy Lands and praying Al-Aqsa, because the governments there will be against it.
Actually, already you can ask Marwan, and this is what we are working on, and hopefully we can get to that point where really can, what we call it a ziyarah, in order to complete the Hajj by going to Jerusalem. And this is, we are working on it. We are putting the guidelines and the things how we can develop that.
It can be any time of the year.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's, we call it ziyarah any time of the year. That's, we could do it, yes.
Yeah. So we have a question in the back.
Whatever, we know it.
In January of 2004, I went on your trip to the Holy Land. It was an outstanding trip, and we had a Christian interpreter who was excellent, and he gave everything in a Christian perspective, very knowledgeable. Since then, I've talked with a number of Christians who've gone there. Some of them have even gone on so-called Catholic tours, and surprisingly, their guides were not Christian. And I think that we should really get the word out that if you go to the Holy Land, that we should encourage Christian guides. Otherwise, we don't get an accurate view of our tremendous history there.
Okay.
That's correct. That's what we are trying to do. Even we have representative of the PLO office here. We're trying to say, that Christmas is for Palestinians. Try to let the world know that we exist and we have Palestinians, we have Christians. And that's what we are trying to. We changed a lot of that since 2004. And now, that's why we organize these trips. Even we use the local travel agencies, the Christians there, in order to show that how they can do pilgrimage and not to be run and rewrite our Christian history. That's one. Second thing is we make the prices reasonable in order, because we are not commercial, we need to make the prices reasonable in order more people can visit.
So what worries me is that
just
I've even known priests who've gone on.
Take another question.
I just want to follow up. I've known priests who've gone on so-called Catholic tours.
I understand
and they had no idea that the tour director from this so-called Catholic tour would not be a Christian. And I think we have an obligation to get the word out that especially Catholic tour groups should have Christian guides. I think we really need to work on that.
I'm working hard on that. With the U.S. Bishop Conference, we put a guideline, what they should do, and that's just how we can get the message to the pastors, what they need to do.
We can definitely revisit this question at a later time. I think it's a great question.
To address the point about Muslim, I'm going to come back to one last question there. To address the point about Muslim visiting, Palestine, I know many, if not most, Muslim governments do not allow their citizens to travel to Palestine. But here in the US and in Europe and many other countries, Muslims who carry Western passports or citizenship, we have a unique opportunity to do such a thing. So if we start here and eventually at one point maybe others can join in. So please. Answer. Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ratib.
Thank you. Now we could have our lunch and we can talk and take a break and Saliba, you are the one who's supposed to lead the
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed and Sir Ratib, for this important panel. We're going to have lunch. It's right behind this wall that
in the conference room.
The conference room, and Rocio Rabi has done a wonderful job, worked all day yesterday to prepare all your lunches. So please help yourself. Please be back here in about 50 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great to see you.